Welcome back to Face the Nation. We are continuing our conversation now with Dr. Scott Gottlieb. You just heard that soundbite from Bob Woodward. There has been a lot of scrutiny this week of the president's response to COVID-19, given the revelations in Bob Woodward's book. For any president, their very first responsibility is to protect the American public. From your point of view, do you think the critical failing here was one of public messaging, or was it operational?
Well, look, the public messaging wasn't clear and consistent in the outset and could have been better at all levels of government. I think if you look back in February, and I think when history looks back, the biggest failing over that month was that we were situationally blind. We had no idea where this virus was and wasn't spreading. And so when it came time to have to shut down cities, rather than focus on the cities that were truly epidemic, like New York City, we went for a simultaneous shutdown order across the whole country, when that was unnecessary now in retrospect, because there were a lot of cities where the virus wasn't spreading at that time, and we could have focused our mitigation. But we had no diagnostic tests in the field to screen people. And what CDC officials were relying on and telling the coronavirus task force was that there was no spread of coronavirus in the United States in February. They were telling them that. Because they were looking at what we call the influenza-like illness surveillance network, basically a surveillance network of who's presenting to hospitals with flu-like symptoms. And they said that they're seeing no spike in people presenting with respiratory symptoms. Therefore, coronavirus must not be spreading. And they were adamant about that. I was talking to White House officials over this time period. They were adamant about that. And I suspect the president was being told as well that this virus wasn't spreading in the United States. And that may have impacted what he did and didn't say and his willingness to, as he said, talk it down a little bit, because he was of the perception that this was not spreading here in the United States. That really was the tragic mistake. Not just that we didn't have the information, but we were so confident in drawing conclusions off of what proved to be faulty information and incomplete information.
Are you saying he was failed by health officials? Are you letting him off the hook?
Look, I think in this respect, the White House leadership was failed by health officials. We did not have a diagnostic in the field. So we couldn't screen for it. We should have. We should have started working on that in January. And we over-relied on a surveillance system that was built for flu and not for coronavirus, without recognizing that it wasn't going to be as sensitive at detecting coronavirus spread as it was for flu, because the two viruses spread very differently. Those were two critical failings. Now, you could say, well, the president put those people in place. He's responsible. You can make second-order arguments around that. But I think ultimately the White House did not have the information they need to make decisions. The key function of agencies in the government is to provide policymakers with accurate, actionable information. The White House didn't have it. And I had a lot of conversations with the White House over this time period because I was concerned it was spreading here, and I was pushing them on that. And they were telling me over and over that they were hearing from top officials from the agencies that they were pretty confident that it wasn't spreading here. I think when history looks back, that's going to be a key moment. That's what was going on over February.
Mm-hmm. All right. Dr. Gottlieb, always good to have your analysis. Thank you for joining us. We want to turn now to Sue Gordon. She is the former Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence and resigned in August of last year. She joins us this morning from Sea Island, Georgia. Good morning to you.
Morning, Margaret. Thanks for having me.
Sure. You've got nearly 40 years of experience in intelligence at the CIA and other agencies. And you had an op-ed this week in which you argued that election interference is a grave and persistent threat. You said you're frustrated with how all of us as a country are talking about election security. You said it's turned vitriolic, diversionary, and unhelpful, and we are doing our enemies' work for them. What do you mean by that?
So I think three things, Margaret. The first is I believe the most significant strategic threat to America is if we end up not believing in ourselves. And I've shared this with the president. Almost anything else we can overcome, but stopping to believe in the way that we govern and the way that we act would be devastating. The second is we know our adversaries are attacking our elections. There's little doubt on it. They continue to. They have in the past. And that's the bedrock of our democracy. But I think we're so focused on the elections themselves that we're forgetting that their intention is to achieve various interests. In the case of Russia, it's to undermine democracy. In the case of China, it's to create an economic advantage and down the line. And when we don't understand the intention, is to make us weak. And what we do is create a conversation that sows distrust in our leaders and our institutions. We've done their work for them. And what I wanted to do is provide some clarity around what we know, what we don't, what we're doing well, and what we need to do better.
I hear you, and I also hear you putting blame in a lot of places for contributing to this. I do want to point out something the White House, the president said from the White House podium this week, which was that he again said that his campaign was spied on. And then last night at a campaign rally, he said this about the 2020 election.
And it's Democrats. They're trying to rig this election. If you go to New Jersey, if you go to Virginia, if you go to Pennsylvania, if you go to California, look at some of these races. Every one of these races was a fraud, missing ballots.
Is this undermining of institutions you're talking about coming from the top?
Yeah, so I'm going to always hold the president more responsible than anybody else because he's, well, the president, and his voice carries further, speaks louder, and so I think he always carries disproportionate responsibility. And that message that you can't trust our system, that you can't trust the vote, that you can't trust the other party, that you can't trust is exactly what the Russians particularly hope to achieve. And their aim would be to sow the divisions and to get Americans to say, you know what, it's not worth it, I can't trust it, we're not going to vote. But he's not the only one. When the other party says that a difference in policy means that he is malfeasant or evil or being controlled, that too is undermining it. So his is the biggest voice, but there are others.
This week, the U.S. Treasury actually put sanctions on a Russian agent who was part of a campaign to denigrate Joe Biden. This is the Trump administration acknowledging this is happening. When you were in office, was it the intelligence community's conclusion that Russia was trying to help President Trump win?
So again, go back to the interests of Russia. Russia is going to support anything that advances its interest. If they believe that President Trump's policies are ones that advantage them, then they will. And that's what you see. It doesn't mean that they prefer the human. It means that they're talking about the policies. And remember that Russia is a very capable adversary. They've been at this for a long time. They've been at this since the Cold War. And they will use human, they will use digital means in order to advance their interest. And I think that's the thing that I would stress. When our adversaries attack us, they are doing it for their purpose. And when we don't respond properly, we are serving their aims.
Do you believe our election infrastructure, where you go to vote, how you go to vote, that it is adequately protected?
Yeah, I am really proud of the work both the government has done to organize efforts, not only at the federal level, but all the way down to state and local, to protect the physical infrastructure around voting. And companies have leapt into the fray to try and protect the infrastructure. So I would never say that it is impenetrable because we have this glorious open nation that has lots of endpoints, but I think we are far better than we were in 18.
And we know there was Russian malware installed in election systems in Florida.
Yeah, what we're talking about more is the systems around the elections, not the election infrastructure itself. So I think our infrastructure is as well protected as it's ever been, even though we can do better on that front. But remember, half of it is influence. And when we look at the information that is being amplified and the misinformation that is going through our social media, we probably have more work to do on that front to ensure that inauthentic messaging that would sow divisions is more protected. So we have more work to do there. But as far as the infrastructure itself, even though it can never be 100%, we're in pretty good stead on that.
What do you mean by that? How do people at home protect themselves from being manipulated by what you're describing?
Okay, so two ways I would say is for every individual, stop forwarding, sending messages that you don't know the origin. We know that on everything from COVID to mail fraud, our adversaries are amplifying, putting messages in that look authentic, and if citizens just keep sending that out, we're doing a pretty good job. So stop amplifying messages and forwarding messages that you don't know their origin. And the second is start doing some critical thinking when you receive information. And if it's someone telling you what to think or that you can't believe, then do some research on your own. And cybersecurity across the board, pay attention to cyber hygiene. It'll save a lot of heartache.
And you said Twitter is of concern to you in particular, and social media. Sue Gordon, it is great to get your insight. We're going to have to leave it there for time today.
Thanks, Margaret.
But hope to have you back, and all of us here on Face the Nation will be back in a moment. The airline industry is one of the hardest hit this year due to the coronavirus. We want to go now to the CEO of United Airlines, Scott Kirby, who joins us from Beaver Creek, Colorado. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Margaret. Thanks for having me this morning.
Sure. The U.S. taxpayer, via the U.S. Congress, provided United and other airlines with emergency relief. United took about $5 billion in cash and loans as part of that emergency program. The deal expires October 1st. That's just 2.5 weeks away. Do you still expect to have to lay off roughly 16,000 people?
Yeah, so first I want to say what the administration, the Congress, both houses, both parties, it was a remarkable bipartisan response really to rescue not just the aviation industry, but the whole economy back in March. An unprecedented bipartisan response. But this is lasting longer and is deeper than most people thought back then. And our revenue, we just said, is going to be down 85% in the third quarter. And in a world like that, United Airlines and others come October 1st without an extension of the CARES Act, and we're hopeful that there will be before October 1st, is going to be forced to lay off employees just to survive. We have confidence in the long-term future and being able to bring everyone back, but getting through a crisis where revenue is down 85% is just not sustainable for an industry like aviation or almost any business for that matter.
How many people will be laid off?
Well, at the moment, it's 16,000, though we continue to work with our unions. Our unions have been fantastic partners. In a world where revenue is down that much, the layoffs are far smaller than they otherwise would have been. And we just got a deal last week that would save about 3,000 of those jobs, which are pilots. And we continue to work with unions on others. But the reality is without more government support for the whole economy, there's going to be more layoffs to come across the economy.
I understand you're saying you hope more federal assistance is coming, but talks are stalled in Congress. Why can't you go to the private markets for that money? What specifically do you need from the federal government?
So at United, we have gone to the private markets. We've raised about $18 billion since this started in capital and to get through the crisis. But in a world where we're still burning $25 million per day, you just can't go forever on that. And our view is demand is not coming back. People are not going to get back and travel like they did before until there's a vaccine that's been widely distributed and available to a large portion of the population. And I hope that happens sooner, but our guess is that's the end of next year. And so you just got to survive those losses through that time and be ready to bounce back. And we'll be prepared to bounce back and bounce back quickly. But really, without government support for an industry that's as critical and an economic engine for the whole economy, that's really the point for aviation is we drive economic activity, not just for ourselves, but for the communities that we serve.
Understood. And I want to underscore something you just said there, because you said you don't think business will be able to come back until there is a vaccine widely distributed. There is the perception, particularly among some conservatives, that the economy can come back while the virus continues to circulate. But you run an international airline, and right now Americans aren't even allowed in to Europe. They're not allowed into Canada. They're not allowed into China. Your international revenue was down 96% year over year in the last quarter. So is the bottom line here, you can't do both at the same time. The virus needs to be under control.
Right. There are some parts of the economy that can recover and are doing well, but there are large parts of the economy. Aviation is one of the most obvious, but anything to do with leisure, hospitality, meeting, conventions, services, restaurants are all hurting and frankly are near depression levels. And borders, as you say, are closed around the world. And that's 50% of our revenue. And until borders open up, that's not coming back. Business travel is almost non-existent as people are doing things like this as they get through the pandemic. And even leisure travel is down significantly from where it was before. And that's just the reality. And in a business like ours, demand is not going to come back until people feel safe being around other people. And that's going to take a vaccine. And that's just the reality. Some businesses can recover earlier, but in aviation and all the industries that we support, it's going to take longer.
Have you gotten any response from the Trump administration to this letter that you signed on to, asking for some coordination with European officials for testing, for example, that would allow for travel to open?
Look, what I would say is the administration and both parties, by the way, senators, Congress, men and women on both sides of the aisle are very supportive of aviation. Both the trying to find ways to open up borders through testing, but also through the extension of the payroll support program. We just have to get a bigger deal done. We're kind of wrapped up in the bigger negotiations that are going on in Washington, but there's really a lot of support for aviation. If people understand the importance to the economy, we just seem to be tied up in the larger Washington discussions about the future. But there's significant support.
Very quickly, why do you think it's safe to fly?
Look, at United Airlines, we've been a leader in safety from the beginning of this. Very proud of it. We created a partnership with Clorox and the Cleveland Clinic called Clean Plus that's helped us innovate and find ways to keep people safe, whether it's electrostatic spraying every airplane. We were the first, really one of the first companies to require masks around the world. But I think the most important thing for safety on airplanes and the least understood is the airflow on airplanes.
Yeah.
The aircraft are designed to have the air come out of the ceiling to the floorboards and refiltered through HEPA grade filters every 2 to 3 minutes. It's literally no place that you can ever be that's anywhere close to an airplane.
Okay.
And we've been doing some studies with the DARPA that'll help demonstrate how safe aircraft really are.
Mr. Kirby, good luck to you. Thank you for your time. We'll be back in a moment. President Trump heads to Arizona to campaign tomorrow, and both candidates will be in Minnesota later this week. Both of those states are on the target list for the campaigns. Our CBS News Battleground Tracker shows Vice President Biden now with an edge in both. In Arizona, he is up 3 points, 47 to 44. And in Minnesota, a state that President Trump lost in 2016 by just 1.5 points, now Mr. Biden is up by a 9-point margin. CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto joins us with more from his poll. Good morning to you, Anthony.
Good morning, Margaret. How are you?
I'm well. So it was tight. We knew that in Arizona, but now Biden has pulled ahead. What accounts for that?
Well, we saw this start to move over the summer, Margaret, amid concern over coronavirus and how the administration was handling it. That is still a huge factor. We find that people who are concerned about the virus, and there are still many, are less likely to vote for the president. And we find Joe Biden with a lead on people's perception of who would handle the outbreak better. But we wanted to understand more about why. And people tell us that looking back, they're more inclined to give the administration blame for how this was handled than to give them credit for perhaps mitigating the effects of the outbreak. And, I should add, Margaret, the president, as you noted, is still very much in play here, is in the mix. And one of the reasons for that is continued strong support from his base. His Republican base is still with him, and they also see this very differently. When we ask them to look back, they're more inclined to see the president as having staved off what could have been a worse outbreak by doing what he did. And so I think that underscores the fact that it's how people evaluate things, not just what they evaluate, and the framework that they use in comparison that really matters and shifts votes here, Margaret.
A key point. And what about on the issue of pocketbooks? What about the economy?
The president does relatively best on the economy of the issues that we measure here, and in fact, a little bit of an edge over Joe Biden on it. It's interesting, in particular for his supporters, the president's supporters, we find that even if they've been financially hit by the impact of the outbreak, they still give the president credit and still think that his policies are going to make things better.
So tell me what's happening in Minnesota, because the Trump campaign has said they think they can flip it, but your data's not showing that.
The white working class voters that were so important to helping the president make this close in 2016 are still largely with him, but some of that base has eroded. Now, that base still believes the president is better on the economy, and better specifically when we ask about things like manufacturing, like agriculture, industries that may be important to them. But going the opposite way, Joe Biden is gaining in this state, as he is in many states, with, in particular, college degree holding voters, college degree holding women. There's a reason for that. They say in even larger numbers that they're voting for Joe Biden to oppose the president. They feel in even larger numbers they don't like how the president handles himself personally. And I think if there's one key group that's been trending towards the Democrats you want to watch in all these states, it is those college degree holding women with whom Joe Biden is building much larger leads than the Democrats had back in 2016, Margaret.
Minnesota was the state where this social justice movement has really erupted out of following the death of George Floyd. What were the perceptions that you found there in terms of what's actually going on with the protests?
Yeah, we wanted to understand just how people could see this so differently. We know that folks on the left and the right have very different views of the protests. But you look at folks on the left and they emphasize seeing the protesters as intending to raise awareness of racial discrimination, trying to change policing policies. But for folks on the right, they look at it and they see protesters as intending to destroy property and be violent and looting, and also as perhaps even trying to overthrow the government. What I think this underscores is that different groups of folks can look at the same thing and come away focusing on different aspects of it. And that again underscores this, why it is people may come to very different views. I think, Margaret, I would add that that's a thread running through this entire race, which is to say, voters are very locked in. We see more than 9 in 10 people who say that they've already made up their minds and they're not moving.
Key point. Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much for your analysis. We'll be right back. That's it for us today. Thanks for watching. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.